Hello, I'm Paula Gomes dos Santos. Me and Fábio ALBUQUERQUE, my colleague, we are from Lisbon Accounting and Business School, Portugal. We bring you our paper entitled Evidence of Long-Term Influence of Local Regulations as a Challenge to the International Harmonization of Financial Reporting. In the context of international accounting harmonization and full regulation 1606 of the European Parliament and the Council, entities in Portugal with securities admitted to trading on a regulated market have been obliged since 1 January 2005 to prepare their consolidated financial statements under International Accounting Standards, NIC in the Portuguese acronym. These standards are based on international accounting standards and international financial reporting standards issued by the International Accounting Standards Board, previously endorsed by the European Union under that regulation. This also allowed to extend the scope of these rules to other entities, a matter that was considered by national legislation. Being the comparability of financial reporting one of the main objectives underlying international accounting harmonization, the literature has discussed the factors that distinguish the adoption of IAS-IFRS, the jure harmonization, and their effective implementation in the financial statements, de facto harmonization, of entities from several countries. Literature identifies cultural factors as barriers to the introduction or implementation of IAS-IFRS. In this sense, domestic standards that were used for a long time may have an impact or a barrier on the de facto adoption of IFRS. Figure 1 summarizes the historical normative framework in Portugal from 1977, the year that entry into force of the first official accounting plan, POC in the Portuguese acronym. The first version of POC was published in 1977. Subsequently, and in order to adapt the POC to the requirements of the EU Fourth Council Directive on the annual accounts of certain forms of society, a new version of the POC was published in 1989. Other important changes followed this, as in 1991, to incorporate European Directive on Consolidated Accounts, the seventh Council Directive. Then, in 2005, it was incorporated to the Accounts Modernization Directive, which amended the fourth and seventh directives. The introduction of the Accounting Standardization System, SNC in the Portuguese acronym, in 2009, based on NIC, sought to include Portugal in the context of international accounting harmonization. The transposition of Directive 2013/34/EU to Portugal was carried out in 2015. Therefore, and to sum up, it currently coexists in Portugal entities that apply the NIC and entities that apply the SNC. Initially based on NIC, the SNC was subsequently impacted by the European Directive, which was not aligned with those standards. So, it is possible to observe from that the POC, regardless that the different changes, was enforced in Portugal for about 32 years, and there was still a period for 5 years in which it remained in force even after the NIC introduction. This exploratory study aims to identify terms and expressions that were used over more than 30 years under the previous accounting standards in force in Portugal in the consolidated financial statements of the main index of Euronext Lisboa entities that at present must adopt the NIC introduced 17 years ago. Thus, the analysis aimed to identify evidence of potential long-term effects of an accounting culture that materialize through an overlap of the concepts in the IAS-IFRS. These effects should not be neglected by regulatory bodies and should be the basis for discussion on the barriers to international accounting harmonization and to the comparability of financial reporting. Through the archive research as a method, the contents of the consolidated reports of the entities listed in the main index of Euronext Lisboa for the most recent years, 2021 or 2020, when 2021 were not available, were assessed. Table 1 shows the entities that integrate PSI-20 and the corresponding activity sector. The most recent consolidated financial statements, year 2021, and 6 of 2020, when it was the last year available, were collected in the first half of April 2022 from the websites of the PSI-20 entities, currently composed of 19 entities. Given that EDP Renewables' most recent consolidated reports are only available in English, the entity was excluded from the study. Thus, the analysis focused on 18 entities. The analysis identified textual references to various concepts and linguistic expressions that only exist under POC, which were synthesized in Table 2. In brackets, we have the percentage of total entities that use them. For example, in POC expressions, exercício are used, and currently in NIC, this is período, and in English, it is period. So we have the old POC, the current NIC in Portuguese, and the current NIC in English. Although the NIC adopted the term período, period in English, it is observed that exercício, the Portuguese term used in POC, continues to be presented by all entities in different expressions. Then, the net income of the exercício, income tax of the exercício, amortizations of the exercício, or reports of the exercício can be seen for those entities instead of periods. Under NIC, the current concept of pressuposto do acréscimo, accrual basis assumption in English, replaced the previous concept of princípio contabilístico da especialização dos exercícios under POC, meaning accounting principle of accrual basis, in a non-literal translation in English. It means that, besides the different designation, there is also a different framework for this concept since then, as an assumption instead of an accounting principle. Despite that, it can be seen that the previous concept continues to be pointed out by most of these entities, only two do not do it, to justify the economic periodization of their incomes and expenses. Furthermore, their income and expenses are sometimes mentioned as proveitos instead of rendimentos, income in English, and custos instead of gastos, expenses in English, respectively. Concerning proveitos, expressions such as interests and similar proveitos, other proveitos, supplementary proveitos, or other operational proveitos are observed. Additionally, the rendimentos a reconhecer, deferred income in English, are often referred to as proveitos diferidos or proveitos a reconhecer, both with the meaning of deferred income, combining the current and the old nomenclature. Similarly, and as regards the custos, there are several references to interest and similar custos, financial custos, operational custos, deferred custos, and accrued custos. Another POC designation that maintains its influence is imobilizado, to name investments in English. More than 83% of entities, 15 out of 18, maintain this terminology, being frequent use of imobilizado assets, corporeal imobilizado, with the meaning of tangible assets, incorporeal imobilizado, with the meaning of tangible assets, or imobilizado suppliers. In this context, it also appears that in some cases, the term amortizações in Portuguese, with the global meaning of depreciation and amortization, is incorrectly used as it has been applied for investment assets in general. Under NIC, the term amortizations, is only applicable to intangible assets with definite useful life, while depreciations are applicable to tangible fixed assets or investment properties whenever depreciable. Even when including depreciation amounts, the financial information contains phrases such as the operational custos do not include amortizações, or amortizações and impairments totalize, whilst in the income statement it is only called amortizações or amortizations and impairments. It was also possible to find a reference to the terminology under POC of 1917 reintegration, when it is referred reintegração of imobilizado. In the context of liabilities, it was possible to observe that in 39% of the cases, the NIC provisões, provision in English, continue to be designated as provisões para riscos e encargos, which is a POC of a 1989 term, which is with POC 2005. It should be noted that this is still the designation which in some cases appears in the statement of financial position. In entities that have inventories in English, it is possible to observe in 38% of the cases the influence of the previous terminology existências, with several references to gains in existências, regularization of existências, or final existências. There is also a mixture of POC and NIC terminology in phrases such as in transit inventories are segregated from other existências. Even though it is not part of the NIC concepts, there is one entity that continues to use the term trespass instead of goodwill in English, being referred to as acquisition costs of trespasses and presented the amortization rate of trespasses. It was not possible to verify in any of the identified expressions or concepts that the entity sector it is a differentiating factor of the following practice. The analysis allowed us to conclude that the application of the POC for more than 3 decades seems to continue to influence the financial statements prepared according to the NIC, since textual references to various concepts and linguistic expressions that only exist in that standards were identified. Although the NIC have adopted new terminology, expressions such as proveitos instead of rendimentos, incomes in English, custos instead of gastos, expenses in English, imobilizados instead of investimentos, investments in English, princípio da exclusão dos exercícios instead of pressuposto do acréscimo, accrual basis assumption in English, or provisões para riscos e encargos instead of provisions in English, are still found in the financial information of these entities, regardless of their activity sector. This evidence corroborates the most recent studies conducted in Portugal, which, although distinct in terms of its specific objectives, concluded that the code law framework presents itself as a barrier to a de facto harmonization, also identifying the existence of a dissociation between formal requirements and real practices. As a proposal for future research, it is suggested to carry out similar studies in other countries, namely European ones, for which English is not their native language, to find if different national environment and cultures may impact the results. Studies of this nature allow broadening the discussion around the implementation of effective measures to reduce the constraints associated with the adoption and application of these standards, with the purpose of achieving higher levels of harmonization or de facto convergence. Here are some of the references. Thank you very much for your attention.